Hello, beloveds. Before we launch into today's wonderful conversation, I'd like to give you a quick invitation to join the quarterly integrative and contemplative retreats that we offer. You can join the email list to get updates by emailing retreats@theellebetrayal.com. Our next offering is a half-day online retreat this Saturday, July 19th, 2025, and then we'll return again this fall and winter and so on every quarter. The purpose of these retreats is to cultivate a space that allows you to connect or reconnect to your deepest intentions. And it also just happens to be some of the most rewarding experiences of my life. I hope to see you there. Laura Dunn, welcome to the LYHL podcast. I am really excited for this conversation in large part. We are first cousins. You are now the second family member that I've had on the podcast. I just a week or two ago interviewed. These are not interviews. I had a conversation with another cousin on my mom's side. So your our lineage is through my dad's side, and my last time I'm remembering seeing you was when I was doing a fellowship in Chicago in 2009, 2010. We were both kind of doing the professional life in Chicago. I think you were there a bit longer than I was. And then I'm on the West Coast, and I think you're on the East Coast. And I'm just
Yes.
excited to catch up and just hear. I know like the little bit I know of it. I just feel like I'm like way on the outside of like your journey, and I know there's just so much depth to it, and I'm just excited to hear a bit about and learn from your life's journey and the things um, that it's brought up for you and is bringing out in you. And there's a similarity between you. I realized this morning between you and my cousin Sarah that I spoke with recently, and that is she's also so I would identify you as somebody that is really justice oriented. And then I was thinking this morning, I was like, oh, that's really cool because even for me, that's kind of a kindredness, and I don't typically think of it in those terms. For her, justice is like a big word. But so I'm so excited that you're here today. Thanks so much for joining the Lyle podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm glad you said justice. I just got a tattoo of that on my arm. It's the biggest, most obvious tattoo. Normally, as a lawyer, I get very small ones I can hide under jewelry. And I'm getting more bold in this political era about advertising what I stand for. So,
Oh,
yes.
that is amazing. Okay. Okay. So that wasn't too much to put that out there. That's amazing.
No,
That's
no, it's
amazing. And
definitely a core
it still looks,
concept.
is it still pink around? Is it still? No, no, that was just
Eh.
I think it's the chair behind it made it look like it was fresh. Um,
I do have a lot of pink in the apartment, and you may see my dog Ruthie roaming around at
yeah,
different
she's
points
already made an
behind me.
appearance. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. My dog, one of them is very sensitive to sounds and will let people know so they can't uh, be in the same room as us right now. uh, well, I tell us, how would you describe, there she is, how would you describe your work and vocation?
Oof. Yeah, I think I'm an out and proud civil and victims' rights attorney. I've been doing that for over a decade. And I think that is a very important career at this political moment in time. So I do deeply identify with justice. I've chosen the legal system. I hardly think it's the only system of justice,
Yeah.
or even the primary one at this point.
hmm
But it is the one that I have dedicated most of my life to serving and had high hopes would be a mechanism to give justice to many. But I am increasingly thinking about politics because
Mm.
I am not seeing the trend of justice and social concern going the direction I would like.
Ooh, I love that. And I'm thinking about just this political kind of teaser there. And I don't know if it was just like a fever dream or something. In the last couple of years, I was like, I could see this. So we were both raised in Wisconsin, if I can share that. And
Yeah.
we didn't live in the same city. But I had this crazy dream, and it hasn't, these things will come back if they're supposed to happen. But I had this thought of, because I've been in education for a while, and I could see this path of, and I'm not an administrator, but I could see the need for people in power needing to be um, more people like me represented, which is a highly sensitive person, somebody that's intuitive. And so I was thinking, like going in, so with my background as a physical therapist, oh, I could go into administration and um, maybe lead, which I'm sure the day to day I would, so when I think about it, I'm like, I don't know where this thought, but in the moment I was like, yep, I could, you know, get up there and I'll be the director of a program and I'm going to change healthcare this way. And then I'm going to, because I was very interested in public health. I took a class in PT school and I was like, oh, if I ever go to more schooling, I'm going to get a master's of public health. That's not what happened. I went and got my doctor of physical therapy and I got a fellowship in physical therapy. So it hasn't happened yet. But I could, in that moment, I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And then I'll run for the governor of Wisconsin. And then, yeah, I mean, so tell me, like politics, are you going to run for the governorship of Wisconsin?
I
Will
think
you contend
Wisconsin's
against me?
I think Wisconsin's doing reasonably well right now. I mean, as much as it swings either direction, I was very deeply proud to see how they handled the Supreme Court election.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that was a lot of focus and a lot of money. And honestly, it went the exact way I thought it would. Like, I'm from Wisconsin. I know Wisconsinites. There's an offense to that. It's like,
mm,
we're our own people. We think with our own mind. We're open to all different sides of the political spectrum, but don't tell us what to do. We're not for sale. And so I have thought there, I have a list literally on my computer of the three states I would run in. And so Wisconsin's one of the options, Virginia, because I've done a lot of victims' rights work. And it reminds me in some ways of Wisconsin. There's a lot of farms, a lot of rural, but also kind of major liberal metropolitans. And then New York, which
New
is, I
York.
think, the most favorable to non-native born candidates, but is very competitive, and everything here is driven by money and connection. So we will find out. It's part of my homework to get serious, look at what it takes to run, because I would love to be in the Senate. That is what I feel
Senate.
called to do. I
Okay.
worked on the Senate Judiciary Committee one summer in law school under Senator Leahy. He was the chairman at the time, and I would love to be in charge of looking over not just the judiciary, but there's obviously the help committee that focuses on education. And those are areas I have a lot of background and experience in.
Mm. Well, I didn't know that I didn't know this was happening. So my body, my cells are like responding to what you're saying, and they're responding with a kind of an excitement and a go get 'em and a and a yes and an amen and like these kind of things of because I too just have a longing for justice and um I've spent my life dealing with people's physical pain. Like that's been my kind of area of justice. And even yesterday in my private practice, I saw um, somebody that is kind of like this somebody that's just vulnerable right now, um, based on people in power in the political climate and there's a lot of just very vulnerable people right now and it felt how did it feel? And we talked before I got on the call, we talked about tenderness and I was like, oh, I think I am a bit tender from yesterday because of a variety of things that happened yesterday. And there was something that was very special about that time. I think it was because somebody else paid for this person to come to see me. And I just felt honored to give this person the level of care that I'm capable of, which I think is a very high level of care in my profession. And it was just an honor to do that to somebody that's to do that with, to give that to somebody who is not, to me, it seemed like they were not accustomed to that level
Mm.
of care. You know, they didn't come to the visit with their questions and kind of their priorities and their demands. It was much more um, passive, and the person was avoiding eye contact when we first just passed in the waiting room before like the appointment started and those things. And um, so I think a lot, and I think a lot about othering and like how so much of I try to make sense of the world a lot, and I see a lot of the core. So I think I probably am. I'm a healer, but I'm a thinker. I think I'm. Uh, I don't think I've ever said this word publicly, but I think I'm a philosopher. I think about like the world and I try to make sense of it and where that goes into as a spiritual person, like theology. Like I think I'm like somewhere in that kind of realm. And yeah, I'm just really excited to hear this. Can you tell us more about like your journey to just whatever you want to share about like how did you decide to become a civil rights and victims right attorney? Um, and then how is that leading you to consider politics?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you were talking about kind of spirituality. As I'm sure you know, I grew up as an evangelical Christian pastor's daughter. And so I felt like I was in the most conservative Christian family in the most liberal city of Wisconsin, which is Madison. And it's a very interesting upbringing because I find I get along with people all along the political spectrum as a result. But I was very much raised and grounded in values of what is justice and how do we lay our lives out, to serve that. And we can definitely dig into this more of, I think there's an unfortunate twist in Christianity of like, to your detriment, lay yourself out. And I think true civil rights leaders know how to sustain themselves and lay out as much as they can at the same time. That's what I've been working on lately. But I think that background really set me up to think about becoming what I wanted to be originally, a prosecutor. I grew up watching Law and Order, like so many people. And
Mhm.
yeah, and as you know, my mom's a lawyer. She did bankruptcy law, but she would sit and talk to me about the ethics of like, oh, that's not appropriate. And here's the conundrum. And so I grew up kind of getting a little legal education. And I was like, what an honor it would be to like fight for people who are downtrodden and to have that authority. And it's interesting because I've never become a prosecutor. I was very close to it actually this year. I was interviewing for the Manhattan Sex Crimes Unit and had gotten a few stages in, and I decided to go a whole different direction. Mostly because I heard what it would take, and I know who I am and I know how
Mhm.
hard I go. And so when they were like, you're going to get calls at 3 a.m. and have to get up and go to a hospital, I'm like, I could have done that a decade ago. What's the right move for me now? And sleep is very, very important to me because the reason I switched from prosecutor to what I became, civil rights, is because I experienced a sexual assault myself in college. And I've been very public about it. I've talked about it a lot because I founded a nonprofit, helped pass a lot of laws. I just like really laid out my story pretty repetitively, which isn't always healthy. I think at some point I developed a separation between my mind and body to do it so much that I have worked very hard to reintegrate, to be a full person in a health, the most healthy sense. But when I went through the process myself, I mean, you cannot understand it until you live it. But I had grown up with this idea that if you're a Christian and you do the right things and you follow the rules, then like things just work out for you. And that is not true at all. You could be the best person in the world doing everything you're supposed to do and hit into a system of oppression and then realize there is no value given to you. And so I found the legal system, particularly the criminal legal system, I don't call it criminal justice, it's just criminal legal system,
Mhm.
um, deeply cruel. Like it pushed me to the point of feeling suicidal because I didn't think I was believed. No one actually
Mhm.
investigated. And I somehow made it through college living in terror of the two men who had assaulted me that were on my campus. They were part of the same crew team. And sports was a big part of my identity. So when I came out and reported the sexual assault, I knew I had to quit the team because inherently retaliation and harassment was going to start. So I really had a pretty traumatic life experience through college. But after kind of, I think, a year or two of absorbing the trauma of that, I will say God's grace. I'm not a super religious person, but I am a person of faith. I think there
Mhm.
are truths that we serve in this life that are beyond us. I don't know if we have the right framework for that always.
Mhm.
But I felt just this moment of being saved from this trauma pattern of drinking and partying. And then I just had a vision of, I actually need to push back and fight. And that came because every single best friend I had either been sexually assaulted before me in college or after me. And I saw each one kind of go through this horrible wave of trauma. And I couldn't stand by it. So um, I decided to report my own experience, went through the Title IX process on campus. It was horrible. It was not effective. It actually blamed me. And that's similar to what happened in the criminal process. So I, through the encouragement of my sisters, Jamie and Wendy, there was an opportunity for me to share my story, and I felt called to do that. And my family did not agree with me, mostly my parents. They were worried about perception. What would it look like? Because we have to remember, this is all pre-Me Too. This is when every victim was Jane Doe, and they were ashamed, and they were in the dark, and they were changing their voice, and so I didn't feel that shame. But when I was deciding whether to speak out, I had that shame put on me pretty aggressively. Like I was told, what if your grandmother reads this? What if church members read this? And I was starting to feel this like wave of shame. And my lovely sisters called me and said, we heard what's happening. Show the world there's no shame. Use your face, use your name. And I always get emotional when I share that.
Mhm.
For so many reasons. I mean, I'm so grateful they made that call. They told me that. But I think I always get emotional because it's so much easier to say than to do. I think
Mhm.
it's like a continual process. So I lived through that, did not get justice in any avenue, but because of the courage of sharing my story and using my name and my face, I became
Mhm.
an activist for it. And so I was able to change laws in Wisconsin to help highlight that alcohol is an intoxicating substance, which I think most people are like, no, duh. That's not what the law said. The law excluded alcohol, and so there was no such thing as being too drunk to consent. And so Wisconsin had to change that law. My story was part of changing that law. And then I moved on to the federal level. I was very involved in the Title IX Dear Colleague letter, which is a watershed moment for that area of civil rights. And it was very telling to me that 7 years to the exact day I was raped, which was in April, it was April 4th, 2004.
Mhm.
Um, the vice president and at that time Joe Biden under the Obama administration released the Dear Colleague letter under Title IX, which made it very clear that even if something is a crime, the school can't defer just to law enforcement because we know law enforcement doesn't handle these types of cases well. So it has to do an internal process. And so I was the only survivor invited to that or the release of that letter because I was the only survivor who used my full name and story. They were able to find me. And I remember sitting there and being so emotional that it like, how can you predict 7 years to the exact day, right? Like I had even forgotten my mom flagged it to
Mhm.
me. I wasn't, just caught up in some small town Wisconsin girl sitting in front of Vice President Joe Biden at this amazing announcement. And I just pledged my life then and there to getting that type of justice for other people because that felt like justice to me. Even though the men that did it will never face a consequence, I changed Title IX in the United States. And after that letter, schools hired Title IX coordinators. They made
Mhm.
Title IX offices. They shifted their funding into that. I know that every time I meet a college student, they know what Title IX is, that I had some peace in that.
Mm.
So people know their rights and know their options. And of course, like all good victims' rights attorneys, not only did I help change the law, but I turned around and then started enforcing it. So I
Mhm.
made a national nonprofit, SurvJustice. We were the only attorneys helping victims in campus hearings across the country for quite a few years. And now I can say almost every single legal aid or local nonprofit does that type of representation. And I've had the honor of training lawyers, and advocates in this. So that's just a little snapshot of the history. I know I tossed like 500 things you can kind of go off of with that.
Oh, I mean, well, it's very clear that um it's very clear that this is something you've been doing for a while. It's very clear that this is a labor of like passion and love. Um, and so I guess some of the things that are happening in me as I hear this is like um there's things that I'm just thinking about personally, and I'm not going to like, well, what was going on in my life of that? I'm not going to do that. But I'm thinking of the thread that you've shared here, and I feel really connected to you because one of my highest values, I don't know if it's like up there, is authenticity. And
Mm,
I just really appreciate you. I can see the through line from the decision making that you expressed making recently of, okay, I'm going to pursue this position as a prosecutor. And you also mentioned doing the work to that in the and you mentioned a number of times. And so there's this thread that's coming through of as an activist, as somebody fighting for justice, that there needs to be self-care to sustain it. And but the work takes a lot of energy, and uh I think there's like a learning and growth that has to happen in the process of it, that you can't just, and this is just in life, but if we talk about as an activist, but it's true in any kind of setting, but activism takes uh, activism and advocacy, because you're taking on big things, but you're also, in deciding to take on specific cases, there's you advocate for individuals, and
hmm
society at large. Um, there's the concrete, and there's like kind of the idea behind it. And so that to me is really coming through very strongly here about because there must be like, I also feel pride for you, and like I hope, and I'm imagining that you feel pride in like all these things you do, and it doesn't change the fact that you still carry that trauma in you. It doesn't change the fact that you will now always have that wound because of what these two men did to you, and that trauma opened you up to oppression in the world in a way that you're having your own unique experience too. And I haven't experienced sexual assault, so you've experienced something like an injustice that you what am I trying to, there's so many things happening in me. You're using
Sure.
it to want to help other people. So there's got to be you're choosing to not, even though you were a victim, you're choosing to not have that define you, like that, oh,
hmm
I was a victim of sexual assault, but you're uh a word that comes to mind is transmute. You're taking something
Yeah.
and you're making it into uh something beautiful to help somebody in individual cases, but also just changing policy and then the fact that you want to go, so when we say policy to go even bigger, and we're seeing the fruit of that right now, people that it's really actually incomprehensible to me. I really just I come up to this fundamental question of like the nature of evil and like how are people so motivated to harm others? Like I just fundamentally I do harm people because I'm human, right? I make mistakes and we rub up against each other, but my orientation to the world is to reduce suffering and um it's confusing to me, and when I in the little bit of the legal world that I've been in, I wasn't involved in a case, but I was supporting somebody in the last few years, and I was like, this is not justice. It was a civil suit, and I was like, the way the
Mm,
judge handled it and everything, I was like, you're just trying to get through your cases. You're threatening us and saying, if you don't like I might
hmm
make things even worse for you. And to imagine what that must be like in a criminal matter, or when somebody has violated you so personally. So I'm really moved by your story and your and the work you're doing, and I'm proud that you're a family member of mine, and I just love how um, I love this journey you're on. Can we talk a little bit more about, well, let's keep going because I told you that we can
Sure.
uh I can do the deep dive before we even kind of get through the questions. But what do you think it means to live your healthiest life?
Ooh, well, given the history I've laid out, that's
Yeah.
been quite the challenge. I think I'm someone that's always been very defined by my athleticism, my
Mhm.
physicality. And so I used to think of health very much as like,
Yeah.
how fast can I run a mile? Like, am I
Yeah.
ready to race? And um, this incident didn't just attack my person, it like prevented my athletic career. And I really had to become a different type of person in advocacy and activism, became that, and now litigations and hopefully political service at some point. But I've used this opportunity, something I noticed very acutely around the time I was doing a TED Talk in 2018. So I'm a TED Fellow. I did a TED Talk on how we could change the laws in the United States by changing our Constitution to better protect victims of gender violence. And around that time, one of the other fellows kind of was like, we should talk about psychedelic healing. And I used to just utterly hate when people ask me about like healing and wellness because I was a warrior. I was a
Yeah.
fighter. I'm like, what are you even talking about? Like, I'm in the trenches, like throwing grenades, and you want to talk about health? Like, it just seemed like this frou frou. I didn't
Uh-huh.
know why people brought it up. And I remember giving really horrible advice in one panel about it because people were like, how do you get up and do this work every day? And I realized later that now that I'm a lot better at health and wellness, I was like, oh, I basically encourage them to like numb themselves. Like I would just ingest
Hmm.
so much of it. It's kind of like inoculating yourself against a poison. When I
Hmm.
wasn't doing these cases and wasn't advocating, even in my spare time, I was watching SVU and other documentaries. It was just my entire life revolved around this. Um, and I started to notice that even though my career success was getting higher and higher, I felt worse and worse and worse. And even though I worked out a lot, I couldn't maintain like the physical appearance or even the feeling I would like. I couldn't fall asleep a lot. And, through a variety of serious events, including a partner who was once like, sleep really matters. And I was like, does it? He was like, here are a bunch of studies about why you should sleep so you don't die.
Yes,
Um,
yes. Yep, that's true.
and glad he sent it. I really didn't know. Many Americans, I think, are just oblivious to the importance of sleep. And so through this journey, I decided to go pretty hard. I went into underground psychedelic PTSD related treatment using MDMA. And that was not an easy decision. Like, just me saying this out loud as a lawyer, this is not the first time I've done it, so don't worry.
Hmm.
Like that's problematic, right? Like I am admitting to committing a pretty serious crime, but in the name of healing. And I have
Hmm.
found that healing has to be more important, especially with our systems of justice becoming less reliable because of the political climate. I hope that holds and we can kind of recover and become more of a civil rights and human rights based nation. But healing was so important to me, and I am a different person because of that. I read
Hmm.
a lot of the studies before doing it. Read a lot of testimonials. So the book Trust, Surrender, Receive is a really good one for people thinking about it. And it has a lot of different testimonials from all different types of trauma, not just, the ones I've faced. And it changed my life. It reconnected my mind and body. I could finally feel the suffering my body was holding, rather than just serving my mind and my will to
Hmm.
push through it. I was able to go back to moments of the assault and reclaim myself
Hmm.
and kind of remove shame or pain from that, including just
Hmm.
somatic pain that was stored in the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I did like a decade of yoga, could never grab my toe and open my hip. And after a few MDMA sessions, boop, I have like wide open hips now.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
I'm realizing, like, to me, health, it's a balance, right? I prioritize sleep now. I always want to get enough of it. I really don't like when people interrupt it. I won't pull all-nighters anymore as a lawyer, come what may. And I have put a lot of time and money into my wellness, personal trainers for weightlifting, Pilates instructors for physical alignment of my body, regular kind of psychedelic, I would say once a quarter or every half year, I do kind of a big psychedelic journey and try to go into whatever I'm still carrying. Most really, I've kind of removed a lot of the trauma. More, it's about relationship health and attachment and how we relate to others. So it's pretty robust now, but I would say it's very central to my life. It's almost like it's a prerequisite for me to serve justice to have health.
Wow. Thank you so much for being here. So being somebody that's help somebody, being somebody that's focused on physical pain and
Mm.
relieving the suffering that people have because of physical pain and physical limitations. It's not always pain, um, but so many people in the world are suffering and they don't need to be. And as a physical therapist, it's like, okay, you need to be have enough flexibility, you need to be strong enough, you need to have enough coordination. Are you, um, uh, I look at these different ways that we can organize capacities of the body and see how people are on that and say, well, you're kind of running at a deficit here, and that's probably why life feels hard for you. Like we need to
Mm.
do some strength training here. And so when you need to pick something up, it's going to be the percentage that it's requiring of your capacity is going to be much less than it is right now. But right now you're running at a capacity, and that works really well in acute pain. That works really well in mechanical pain, which means like, oh, I have shoulder pain. Ow, it's gone. Ow, it's gone. And then I just need to work on some things to, help with the mechanics of the fine tuning of the shoulder, so it stays right there. But the longer that I go on, because my goal is to reduce suffering, and as I get more skilled, and because I am somebody that's very observant in the world, and I find myself increasingly, there's things that like a new grad can help with. And there's certain things that they can't, that comes with like experience. It comes from experience of the world or people or in the profession. So increasingly over time, I see people that have already seen other PTs or other healthcare providers, or they've been dealing with these pains for years,
Mm.
decades, and there is this core sense in them that I don't think I think there's a but I think even though I've been running into all these roadblocks, I think there's like a better way. And increasingly, and then because I believe in integrated living, I've been going on my own journey. I did my fellowship when we connected in Chicago. I was there to get advanced training in hands-on skills at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And so that was, you think like kind of chiropractic. I was learning kind of these like higher level techniques and the skills, the ability to feel with my hands and direct the body with my hands. And
Mm.
so that was through manipulating joints and muscles. But there was a very big, like, thought process training. There was, somebody standing over you. There was lots of mentoring, and they were there with me with the patients, and they were like, "Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that?" Which is very helpful. It's very painful and it's very tiring to have somebody asking you what you're always thinking. But this is a long way of saying what I do now is, and as I've grown as a person in my own health journey. So I bring up the fellowship to say, after that, I was kind of like, I'm good. And that was 2010. I was like, I don't need to learn, I don't need to go to a course and like learn like the latest kind of trick you can do, which a lot of PTs kind of want, which I can understand, especially if they didn't have this intensive experience. They're looking to kind of get like little weekend grab bags of little options
Hmm.
they can have. But because my experience was so intensive, I was kind of like, I think I'm set, and my role, like in the fellowship, like and in this the society that I'm in, or that's not the we don't use the word society, but the member of this community is we are tasked with educating people. That's kind of like the level. But what I became increasingly interested in was just like the whole human was how do we bring in, like, if I'm going to help somebody, I need to be able to understand their personality. I need to be able to read their fears. And so it became this more integrated thing. And people started to say, like, oh, this feels like therapy. And they obviously it's physical therapy, but they meant, right, like kind of talk therapy or mental health therapy. Because I started to realize if I'm going to help them, it's not just the body thing. And then so there is, so many of us are numbing, so many of us are to just get through how things are structured because our society is so disembodied. It is, kind of grinding us in wheels and cogs. And so I'm finding this journey of like, well, if I'm going to help people, it's not just strengthening, it's actually, wow, your breathing is really disordered. And almost everybody that's coming in now says they have anxiety. And
Mm.
there used to be a social stigma about it, but and I'm in the LA area in LA, so I there is less stigma here than I'm sure that is still present in other parts of the country, but it's almost ubiquitous that everybody's coming in with that. And we know you speak about like the hips and um, that holding that tension. And I think even of I read Bono's recent book, Surrender, and he had a volatile relationship with his dad. And
Mm.
I'm trying to remember even the levels of singing. So because I can't remember what the jab is. He wanted to be able to sing a little bit higher. Is that would it be like a tenor? And I'm trying in this moment I can't remember, but his dad would kind of jab him that he couldn't like reach those higher notes. Like in that his dad, and so he always felt like his dad was like this better performer than him, and his dad wasn't really supportive of him, and that fueled him, right? That anger like fueled him, and then they became you two. But he struggled still, and then his dad died, and then, hi, sweetie. I forgot her name. Some
Ruthie.
Ruthie. I was like, it's something with an R. I was gonna say Rosie. Ruthie, hey girl.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the inspiration.
Richie, all right. I love it. Hi,
Mhm.
Ruthie. But the experience and how he described it in his book, he felt like once his dad died, his dad gave him his blessing.
Mm.
But with my knowledge of like singing intention, I think
Mm.
with his dad dying and not having that, and he finally forgave his dad, that I think that released that tension in the same way you're talking about, like this protective mechanism in the body. And so increasingly, I don't have people hold stretches. I just say your body's
Mm,
afraid. Why is because literally your muscles don't shorten.
yeah.
If they're short and tight, it's your brain telling them to hold. So how are we gonna get to relax? Well, we need to actually. So I do like so much mindfulness work, breath work to um, teach people safety in their body. So I love that
Yes.
and anything that's true is true, right? So you're going to find that like through your psychedelic journey. And I love how you're bringing all those things together because that's what I find like in healthy living that there isn't these detachments between things and there's not even like good drugs and bad drugs, right? And so this idea, and uh, I wrote about it just even with marijuana, like exploring that in my early 40s. And then I've progressed recently to try, which I don't think I've mentioned publicly, psilocybin, all in an
Mm,
effort to, yeah, to heal, to kind of get more connected to my body. And I too have found them very helpful. And I think with any of these kind of mind altering drugs, it's really important that it isn't like a party kind of,
yeah.
situation, like set and setting that you're doing the work in the same way. We can make analogies, but I'm not going to take the time to do that. But thank you so much for that. I love that. So, and you said trust, surrender, and receive. Was that the?
Yeah, that's the name of a book that has a lot of MDMA therapy patients giving testimonials. The more recent work I've done is with mushrooms, and I think that's a hard, scary for some people to start there. I think MDMA is very accessible as long as
Oh,
you're
okay.
okay going into areas of trauma. I think the next level, like mushrooms, because you can see things that can take you places. So once you develop some comfort and trust, I actually think mushrooms are, a gift from God on this planet. So,
Well, yeah, right, right. Yeah. And I mean, and the more you learn about it, and when we talk about power and laws and
hmm.
advocacy, like, and kind of how a lot of laws aren't really written with our best interests in minds, but
Yes.
it's kind of like who are these laws serving? And
Hmm.
so I appreciate you mentioning that and bringing that to the table. Um, there was one thing I was going to say, but I think it slipped. What do you want to say, Ruthie? Is this a common thing for her to? So if you're listening to the podcast right now, and when you're not watching on YouTube, Ruthie, she's some sort of mix.
Yes,
She,
she's a
oh,
lovely white pup, full of Treeing Walker Coonhound, Norwegian Elkhound, Whippet, and Chihuahua.
amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So kind of this mid-sized kind of dog. And she has made her way up to the
Right on
side of
camera.
Laura. And it's just uh they're a pair right there. And the ears are
Yeah.
flipped inside out.
Yeah, I can put them back. I like to do that.
Oh, you do that to
She
her
got
and she doesn't mind. Okay.
Yeah, I she's doing this because she's reminding me it's time to go outside and to walk because she hasn't had her
Oh,
noontime
I
walk.
see.
So she's very polite about it, very thoughtful
Ruthie, it's just
about
going to
it,
be a
but
little bit longer, okay? But she'll take care of you. Don't worry. Well, since Ruthie made this appearance, and this is not a standard question, but what is she teaching you?
yeah. Ooh, I love that question so much. So she is technically certified as an emotional support animal because she's helped me
Oh,
with
mm-hmm.
insomnia pretty significantly. I let her sleep right in my bed. She really puts her limbs on me, and I love feeling that safety and connection with her as we rest. But when I got her, I started realizing I have a lot of emotional avoidance from my upbringing, and that's, I think, perhaps universal in our family.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Or ubiquitous, I should say.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I noticed when she was a puppy, there was some days, like, the first 3 weeks you take in a rescue dog, like everyone says, it's going to be tough. And there was some day she was like on my bed and she's like, play with me. And I was like, don't make eye contact with her. Don't show any excitement. Don't give her any energy because she's going to drain you of like all the energy you have. You don't have enough. You just don't have enough
Yes.
to do this.
You don't have, yes,
And
that's
I,
scarcity. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
and then it clicked. I was like, oh. this is emotional avoidance. I am learning to be present with someone
Mm,
else. And so what I learned was I can be present on the bed when she wants to play, but I could be reading a book or doing something that helps me maintain my energy versus pour it out to her and feel like I have nothing left for myself. So I tend to say that she is like my heart externalized. She is just
mm,
love
mm.
incarnate. And she has taught me to be more present and available to relationships and love. Because when you go through trauma or you have more repressive upbringings, yeah, there's a scarcity, a clenching,
Yes, I
I
feel
don't
that.
know.
That scarcity is so strong. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, well, so the third question that kind of guides this podcast is what are you currently learning about living your healthiest life? So um, maybe we were already kind of talking about it with Ruthie there.
Yeah, I've been on a journey specifically around how the intimate romantic and or sexual relationships of our lives really either feed us or drain us.
Hmm.
I think we don't often really think about maybe the quality of our relationships and health. I think some, therapists obviously do, but it's not necessarily top of our list if we're thinking about how's my health doing, but the quality of our relationships is so essential. And I think the more you step into authenticity, the more you express yourself, you realize relationships that are very dear to you don't serve. You have to kind of recategorize friendships, family relationships. And for me, it's been the hardest around romantic and or intimate sexual relationships because I'm a big fan of Dr. Esther Perel. I believe
Mm,
her when she says they're the most like our original relationships when we were children and dealing with parents. And so something that I've definitely picked up on, I watched the Hillary Clinton documentary and um, I'm blanking on the name of one of her top advisors, but Anthony Weiner was her husband. Something I pulled from that documentary that I don't think was the point of it, but spoke to me was, Hillary picking Bill as a partner, and he is a very flawed and in some ways morally questionable person. I don't love and I very much believe accusations made against him and how he's treated women. And that's not how I view Hillary. And so for her to stay with him, I was kind of like, I'm trying to understand this. And in the
hmm
documentary, it's very clear to me that desire to feel loved um, can supersede our judgment on
hmm
occasion. We stand
hmm
by people we should not. We do not fight the fights we need to fight. And it can have very big consequences. In the end. And so I think I've always been convinced that for me to be a good political leader, I need a really good spouse who not only can socialize at the fundraiser, be both an advocate for me, but not clung to me and has their own kind of differentiation and ability to show up in life in their own kind of missions and passions so I can focus on mine. But I think very much so, I've always wanted a partner who is not afraid to morally check me. And I've been lucky
hmm
enough to have pieces of that from partners in the past where they've said the hard thing to me of you're losing sight of your vision. One example that comes to mind, my long-term partner in DC, I left my national nonprofit, transitioned, and they redid the website for my nonprofit and they had removed me from the story. And I was like, how dare they?
Mm.
I was upset and I like emailed, like, what happened? And I called my partner fuming and he's like, is it about you? And I was like, oh, that's what I needed to hear. And you were brave enough to say it to me.
Mhm. Mm.
So I've been thinking a lot about I'd rather be alone than with the wrong partner because the energy
Mhm.
loss is
Mhm.
extraordinary.
Mhm.
But I'm hoping to have the right energy to call someone in that
Mhm.
can help me accomplish what I want in this world and my potential in this world, while being that important check, that not only gives you love, but also gives you a little moral kick in the pants if you need it.
Oh, I love this. And I never know where these conversations are going to go. And I love how you're drawing out different things from me. So, so your dog is named Ruthie,
Hmm.
after RBG. That there was a documentary, RBG, right? Was that what it's called? Came out
Yes.
in 2017, and I lived for Portland for a little blip then, and I remember going to the local theater, and there was several documentaries that came out right around that time, and I realized I really like documentaries versus um, uh, traditional films, whatever you call those. I'm blinking right now because there was Won't You Be My Neighbor also came out, like Fred Rogers.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
this, and it was like September or something. I'm just remembering. And I'm remembering going to these films. And I remember sitting through that film and hearing the story of Ruth and Marty and like going back and forth and how they
Yeah.
supported one another. And I was married, and I'd been married, let's see if it was 2017. I had been married for 9 years. And I just felt like this longing. I was like, I need a Marty.
Hmm.
Because I was like, I have big aspirations. Like, I feel like I'm here to do things in the world, but I don't have a Marty. Um,
Mm.
and that was like a real conundrum, but it was kind of just, an observation and and fast forward, like I'm now uh divorced, and as I um approached like my new relationship, my current relationship, that was something that I shared. She hasn't yet seen the film to know, but like that was something when made like a list of like, well, what am I looking for? And
Mm.
I don't know. Yeah, it's just to have somebody, yeah, that can, yeah, support is so important, and um, yeah, there was just like a hole in me, I guess, of needing so when you, yeah, realize who you are and kind of what your background has, just who you are, who you would be regardless, nature nurture, in addition to how uh my environment had shaped me. There's just like a fundamental kind of need, and within a week of meeting her, it was so strange. We were walking, I remember walking our dogs, and it's like, I feel so capable with you. And
Mm.
that was not on the list. It wasn't like, I need to have a partner that makes me feel capable. And it was such a unique experience to be with somebody that like just made me feel, and yeah, I don't know. It's just a very, very interesting. So that's, in your sharing, that's some of what emerges for me.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that documentary because, yeah, you think it's about her life. It's kind of about the love story. And yeah, it's really beautiful what people can achieve, whether they're doing it as a couple or community. Like, there's a variety of ways to have that support. But I think the hardest part about what I've gone through, what I'm coming out of, and what I'm trying to lean into is I used to be such a lone wolf out of the need for protection. And then I think a misguided sense that I could just do it all, which is, oh, one of the world's favorite delusions for workaholics. Like, if you just do a little more. I'm a recovering workaholic. I may
Mm,
still be a lawyer, but I do not work in the same way, and I'm just as effective. So, for those
hmm
who are out there struggling with
mm.
workaholism, there is a different way. It feels great, by the way. Um, yeah, so no, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm definitely looking for my version of Marty.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Um, well, what's something that you wish people knew more about living their healthiest life?
Mm. I think maybe I'll go into like authenticity with that one. I don't know if it's possible to be healthy if you're inauthentic.
Mhm.
And there's, a lot of Instagram reels online and memes. Gabor Maté like comes up a lot
Oh
on my
my
feed.
God.
and,
Yeah. That's like
and
a
he
woo.
talks,
Yeah.
yeah, But he talks a lot about how women in particular tend to have all these autoimmune
Yeah.
disorders.
Yeah.
And we literally have been so socialized and cultured to carry the weight of others at the expense of ourselves. And if you manage to carry yourself in there, that's great. You're still carrying more than your share because you're carrying it for often partners and children. And, it's not uncommon. And I even see it as a lawyer, like people default that you're an administrator and an organizer and all these things in addition to. And
Mm-hmm.
those defaults are so socialized that we don't even know when they're happening. And as someone who challenges a lot of sexism in the moment when I see it, it's hard. Like I've had to tell lawyers, I'm not your secretary. You're going to have to look through the case file yourself. I will give you a
Love it.
copy and you should
Mm-hmm.
maintain it because you're my co-counsel, not,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not your supportive staff. And it's hard to have those conversations with grace. And I think if
Mm-hmm.
people are like me, the experience is we absorb it all, and then at some point we're like, we can't live this way, but then you flip and it's too aggressive. You're like, no. And then there's this like beautiful middle that I think takes a minute to find. Um, and it really, if you're someone who's into like masculine and feminine energies, I really think it's in the feminine energy. How can I hold space for myself without using aggression, but
Mm-hmm.
in tapping into kind of a softer way of drawing these boundaries so that others can still feel able to engage and work
Mm-hmm.
without, because everyone always feels bad. A lot of these things are unconscious. We don't always mean to, mistreat people, but if it's programmed and no one's ever said anything before, you're going to feel a little called out. And Bell Hooks is someone who had a big
Mm-hmm.
impression on me when I was growing up and kind of starting to do this advocacy work. Cognitive dissonance is created when someone views themselves one way and you kind of point out maybe you're not quite as involved or aware as you think. And she talks about a love ethic, actually having
Mm-hmm.
compassion. And I think we're losing that. I think that's part of this political environment. We don't have a lot of compassion and we don't have a love ethic. And it's hard to when it's looking more and more oppressive and evil and vicious. But the world has never become a better place because people have polarized. It leads
Mm-hmm.
to wars and fights and
Mm-hmm.
domination. The alternative is really grounding in yourself, having the authentic self of what is right for you, and also how to stand up for others in that space. And if you can do it with a love ethic, I mean, that's golden. I'm not saying I hit it 100%, but that's the
Mm-hmm.
goal.
Woo! Well, there's so much in there for anybody listening, right? So, we've got you got books and resource in Gabor Maté is like on YouTube like no other. There's so many free resources from him. So if you have a cell phone, with cell connection, you're able to get that. Like his book, The Myth of Normal, sounds like you've read that. I'm making my way through that and he feels so kindred to me when I talk, because when I think about like the brokenness of the healthcare system and just trying to just help people heal and just like people that can't slow down, right? There's this and you talk about, becoming or being a recovering workaholic and like now kind of being on the other side, but there has to be like this waking up to that. And that's something he speaks about in the book of like he knew patients before their autoimmune disease, and then he's sees them
Mm,
after. And then he started to see the pattern of and there's four attributes, which is really some of these that you're describing of, just looking for other people's needs above your own, people pleasing, things like this. And so, what a great resource and just really fantastic examples you've given of just how that relates to your daily life in work. And I want to I wanted to connect you to my cousin. I'm saying this I guess on the podcast. I was like I'm going to say this after, but I'm just saying it because she
mm.
works in gender equity. Um
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
So injustice, and you're both doing that from your own sphere. And she does a lot of education in that, and she's like globally educated, and so just has a very unique perspective. So I'm so grateful, and it's kind of like you guys are going to be posted kind of in rapid succession. So I love the kind of the 1-2 in terms of 1-2 punches of resources. And then bell hooks, yeah, it has been like so important to me. And I was gifted one of her books about love and come when I was coming
Yeah.
early stages of my separation and divorce. And it was so helpful and helped me reflect even on family systems. And
Hmm.
when in this discussion of like what kind of partner are you going to choose, she talks a lot about that, and even being in relationships for a long time, but then kind of different. I'm remembering her talking about kind of care versus love,
Yeah.
and I think about that a lot. Like, so like what is love, and redefining that versus people that say they love me versus like what do their actions show, and learning just to trust myself of that what I need for love is worthy of knowing and respecting, and that that's part of what love is to find out. So you're talking about authenticity, which is amazing to me, and I'm on this journey that I label becoming divergent, right? Because if we're going to be authentic, we're all going to be these unique, eccentric, kind of weirdo people, because there's no going to be no template for us. And so each time you meet somebody, everybody's going to be so different. And so when it comes to love and like this ethic of love that um because of our eccentricities and our different needs and our different experiences and our different biologies, and we're going to need to be loved in different ways, and that is like a fundamental part to a healthy relationship is, and I'm learning how to do that because a big part of my upbringing is, and I think it's tied into scarcity, is not an opening myself up to being told I didn't do it perfect, right? Because if there's like any sort of evidence of I didn't do something right, there's like a profound need to do something right. And if I don't, then that just crumbles my sense of self, because my sense of self wasn't predicated on that I'm just amazing just because I breathe and just because I exist,
Mm.
that it's predicated on what do I do? And that can lead to uh, this desire to go, go, go. And so I'm so
Yeah.
grateful for all the things you're bringing to light. It's a lot of food for thought for me. I went to a meeting of white people fighting for justice for Black people yesterday, and I this is kind of a new in the last year even, or whatever, like stepping out into organizations that are, finding solidarity and community with people that share these values and finding ways to do actionable things. And solidarity has been so important to me in sustaining, because it can feel so isolating. And I think that's how a lot of people are feeling right now when you talk about this
Mm.
like us and them that's kind of happening. And it's so much easier to point the finger and say, that person is wrong, that person is you it's so much easier to have this black and white thinking, which was something I think that was presented to me even in evangelical Christianity of
Very much.
I have the truth, and it's imperative on me because I'm a truth bearer and a light bearer that you living in darkness need to hear from me so that you too can, avoid the consequences of your, and that, those sort of beliefs separate me from people. They
Yeah.
don't, they don't allow me to see other people's inherent worth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a journey for me to even people that have, uh, there's all those levels. I think of like Buddhism, they'll talk about, I'm not remembering the practice, but you kind of start with like affirmations kind of close and like safe, somebody that so maybe it's your dog, right? Like Ruthie, for me, like Wilmer, that's like whenever he
Mm.
sees me, it's a whale, it's a his tail is wagging that like oh, like be in that presence and then go increasingly and then the outer level is towards somebody that you would tend to feel more animosity with or there's like a harm in there and to feel loving compassion for those people. And that's such a helpful framing for me, like to have a different breakdown and expression of what love can look like. Which
Yeah, if
is,
I
I think,
can,
yeah, yeah, come in. Yeah.
I just really want to quickly weigh in there. I don't know what this is from. Maybe you will. It's about, like, I think emotional maturity. At first, we judge others, and
Mm,
then sometimes we judge ourselves because we're taking accountability. That's an important step. And then at the end, there's judgment for no one. We
mm,
kind of realize we're all part of the human condition. So
mhm.
that's a challenge. That is not an easy feat.
Mm-mm. I love that. I don't think I've landed on that before. But
Hmm.
it makes intuitive sense to me and a different verbiage for expressing, different verbiages are particularly helpful to have access points into ways, kind of circumventing walls or kind of calluses we have or things like that
Yeah.
to kind of penetrate our heart. Um, so I love that. I'm so glad that you took time out of your day to come today on the Lyle podcast, and thanks for allowing Ruthie to be a guest there.
Yes, guest star.
Yeah, thank you so much to all my listeners. May you always see the blessing. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Lyle podcast. I'm so glad you're here. If you liked what you heard, you can find me on Instagram and YouTube at the Elle Betrayal, as well as on my website, www.theellebetrayal.com. Of course, you can find me back here at the next episode of the Lyle podcast. There's numerous ways to support my work so I can keep helping you live your healthiest life. You can do this financially via links on my website or the show notes, by subscribing to the podcast and YouTube channels, by joining my newsletter community, aptly named the Lyle Newsletter, by rating the podcast, by sharing with others, those you meet, and participating in coaching sessions. It's my passion to help you live your healthiest life. I'm so glad you're here. I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you're learning and the insights you're gaining from these conversations. May you always see the blessing.